Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here to continue our expectation series. Been having a lot of fun with this July and June. And today we're going to talk about two players again, one from the offense, one from the defense, Gus Edwards and Tavius Robinson, the rookie pass rusher. Joining me to do that is Jason Smith. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing really well, Ken. Great series, by the way, and very happy to be a part of it. So thanks again for having me on.
Always a pleasure, Jason. You know that. You're welcome anytime. And if I said anything different, it would kind of be a lie, given the 20 or so shows we've done together over the last year and a half or so. So really happy to have you as a regular part of the family. And I'd like to be on your show, of course, whenever you'd like to have me. Let's talk about Gus Edwards, though, first a little bit. Now 28 years old, entering his sixth season. Missed 21 entirely, came back in 22, had a season that started late, but he again played very well, basically like he has for the rest of his career.
I thought it was a good season. I was really watching him and JK closely to see how the serious injuries that each of them have had affected them. And Gus, to me, looked much closer to the old Gus than JK did, especially when JK first came back. I think Gus's injuries, it's tough to say, but JK's was about as serious as it could get from a knee injury standpoint. So overall, another year, Ken, 5+ yards per carry for Gus Edwards, 4 out of 4.
Yeah, since 2018, he's second to Nick Chubb in terms of yards per carry, and it's just by a razor thin edge. They're both 5.2, but it's 5.24 for Chubb and 5.16 for Edwards. And he, since the merger, is one of only 9 backs with 500 plus career carries, and he's got 501 right now, who has 5.0 or greater yards per carry. And Barry Sanders is 10th. He's at 5.0, but it's really 4.996 or thereabouts, or maybe it's 4.992, but it's a slightly less than 5 yards per carry. Anyway, the company is great there because it includes Bo Jackson at number 1, who only, by the way, how many career carries do you think Bo Jackson had?
It's crazy because he shared the backfield with Marcus Allen a bunch. I would say, I don't know, 550, 600.
514. I was surprised. I mean, short career, obviously, one of the things that kept Bo Jackson ahead of the curve statistically, aside from being an unbelievable athlete, and O.J. Simpson saying he brought more to the position than anybody he ever saw, was the fact that he skipped his decline phase with the injury, and obviously when that happens for whatever reason, Shoeless Joe Jackson, another player who second or third highest batting average of all time, whichever he is, I think he might be second. He missed his decline phase, and that's it's really nice not to do that, but it's statistically a response to that, a result of that. So anyway, Gus Edwards and most of the other people on the list, because most of them are current backs who were in the low 5s and are going to drop off the list by the time they retire, possibly including Edwards. But he is in outstanding company. Jamal Charles is on that group, and it was just interesting to say, but it's historic level, and the Ravens' run game, and particularly under Roman, has really suited him.
It really has, and just a couple of points here, Ken. The consistency in the raw numbers from his rookie year to 2020 before the injury. I mean, you're talking about only 11 carry difference between his highest year and his lowest year for carries. His yards, his low was 711, his high was 723. So you're talking about 3 straight seasons with between 133 and 144 attempts, and 3 straight seasons ending between 711 and 723 yards.
Remarkable.
It was almost like if he wasn't hurt in 2021, you could just look at those numbers with Greg Roman still as the coordinator and say something like, yeah, he'll probably have about 140 attempts for 700 and some yards and 5-point-something yards per carry. That was his role. He played it perfectly. And something to comment on, Ken, just from a personal standpoint, Gus is a Raven to me. Like, he'll always, no matter what happens from here on out, he'll be a Raven, a part of Ravens history for me, because his emergence when Lamar took over just started a whole new era of football that we're still in right now. just a total turnaround for the team.
Yeah, they both, in fact, in that same game, that Cincinnati game, which basically started the Ravens on their playoff push in 2018, they both came in, and Edwards had a 100-yard game, and Jackson had a 100-yard game. In fact, one of the weirdest moments that you'll ever see, Gus Edwards scored the touchdown which brought them within 2. Then he went on the field for the 2-point conversion, scored that. And then he went on the field to cover the kickoff immediately on the very next play. Just one of the weirdest sequences you'll ever see. They didn't try and get a different 11th man for that kickoff, and just very odd. But if you wanted another anecdotal story of Gus, that was pretty remarkable. And they came back, they tied it at 21. They went on to win that game against Cincinnati. One thing that we've always seen from Gus is a great yards after contact per attempt rate. And he's at 3.64 last year, 5th in the NFL. It was his career best actually last year. And here's the weird thing. Did not really force a lot of missed tackles this last year. 15.5% missed tackle force rate is not that high for a power back. It's pretty average, but he gets a lot of fall forward yards. A lot of times where he's touched, and it's maybe not quite a what PFF would call a missed tackle, but it's still a good yards after contact opportunity. So just been remarkably consistent in that way as well.
It's surprising to me, and I think that the amateur psychologist in me says that last year he knew maybe he didn't have that full flexibility back in the knee, and just decided to finish runs the hard way instead of trying to make somebody miss. So maybe this year a little bit of that comes back. Now, I didn't think, from we talked about the eye test standpoint, I would say Gus was maybe 90% of what I remembered him from 2020. Still a very good player, still a very consistent player. But I think he had a little bit left on the table, maybe, that hopefully we'll be able to see coming up here in 2023. Some of that, I think it shows up in that missed tackle number, Ken, forced missed tackles, where he had that lateral movement that just improved every year, it seemed, where he got more and more elusive as a running back. But last year, I think he did really finish runs with power as well as he ever has, and is able to get the leverage of a much shorter back at his height.
Yeah, definitely he has all of the elements of a power back you would want. And more than any other player, he's a designated runner when he goes on the field. It used to be Andrews was a guy who would play a fairly low percentage of snaps. And I'm talking about his first couple of years in the league, 18 and 19 in particular. And he would get a high percentage of the targets on those plays. Edwards is the same way with running the ball. He goes on there, typically on first or second down, but there's certainly for some very big runs he had, in particular the closeout run against the Steelers on 3rd and 3 when he ran for 6 yards. And, the Ravens had, who do they have in the game at that point? I think it was Anthony Brown was actually in the game at that point because Huntley had been hurt. And it was a huge 3rd and 3. And the season was largely riding on it in terms of the hopes of still making the playoffs anyway. And he and the offensive line were able to put it away with a nice 6 or 8 yard run, 6-yard run. If you look at it, it's Q4 214 in that game to put that away.
Yes, made it on my highlight tapes for a bunch of different players. The blocking on that play, I remember specifically. And it's one of those plays in which, Ken, it doesn't look flashy. Why is this on the highlight tape? Well, it was to close out a game, and you could see the celebrations of the players afterwards. And I believe it was Anthony Brown, because I'm remembering that fake shovel pass forward game. I think that might have been the one. And Gus finished it off. But yes, we analyze these players a lot, Ken, and deep dives, dig into their games. There's really a lot. Sorry for stumbling there, but Gus, he's just a steady player and one of my favorites just because of his no-nonsense demeanor. You never hear anything from him. When he does talk, he's very mild-mannered, but he plays with the passion, and you can see the drive and the willingness to compete. I think he went a long time, Ken. Didn't see this stat, Googled briefly. Maybe you have it, long shot here. But he went a tremendous amount of carries without taking a tackle for loss.
Yes, when he's a rookie.
I think that streak might have extended into the next season, obviously, but kept going for a while. You're talking about a straight-ahead runner But yeah, aside from all the analytics, all the analyzing that we do, I just really love Gus, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to jump on this show with you, just to show some appreciation for the player.
Yeah. Well, he's been a great Raven already, whatever happens, whether this is his last year as a Raven, which it might be. Obviously, he's one of a couple of guys. We'll come back to that a little bit later. I want to talk about his receiving a little bit first, though, because that was an area in 2020 when he last played, obviously, that he was very effective at 9.9 yards per target. 21 didn't play. 22 came back and had 0 receptions on 2 targets. So obviously not a factor in the passing game this last year, but the 9.9 yards per target, I mean, that's one of the highest numbers ever for any receiver if you want to define it down to 13 targets that the Ravens have ever had. Maybe there's 6 guys, 7 guys that have been that high or higher in 13 plus targets. It really is a terrific number for a running back, period. There's some big plays. Remember one 35-yard play roughly down the middle of the field where they, broke the typical rules in terms of getting him an opportunity farther down the field than you would normally do for a running back. I would love to see that come back. I don't really know if that's in the cards for him.
Yes, and you think about it, that'll be something I touch on the when we get to the good year, great year. But with such a low number of catches and targets, for that matter, 13 targets, 9 receptions in 2020. I think he had one that he really earned down the right sideline, and a big play like that can skew those numbers. So no, Gus, I think in the passing game, what I love most about him over all the backs that we have actually is his pass protection. So it would be really nice if he could expand his game in that area, because J.K. Dobbins started slow. I think he's maybe average at pass protection, sometimes not average at pass protection. Justice Hill is a little undersized. You have no idea what you're getting from the rookie, and rookies usually take some time. Strictly from a pass pro standpoint, if Monken wants to send out 4 receivers, or combination of receivers, tight end, 4 targets out into the pass play, and rely on his back to pass protect more, Gus would be the best candidate for that, in my opinion, going into the season.
I like Gus, and certainly in terms of size, I would automatically think he is the guy that would take you, to the next level as a pass protector. Honestly, at his size, he should be able to stop some linebackers in their tracks. Don't have to go low on them or whatever. I mean, he should have more effect, in my opinion, on the pass blocking game. I don't think it was ever a consideration that he'd be in on third down to pass protect. That's been Hill anyway. This last year, it could be Dobbins again, possibly, if they want some more playmaking out of that as well. But I think we'll see. I think we could see a variety of things, and because of it, I think we'll see more passing on all downs. Certainly, all of them. There's going to be a focus on what pass blocking they can deliver.
Yes, and I can remember a few plays off the top of my head where it was an RPO, and Lamar put the ball into his belly. Tried to put the ball into his belly, but Gus recognized a blitz coming from the other side of the formation, bailed on the fake, and just picked the guy up. So I like Gus's vision.
That's big time.
Yeah, it's the vision. I mean, he's big enough to where even if he gives ground or doesn't get the best of the contact, where the vision is the number one thing. You try hard. Saw that with Ray Rice. I don't think he was terrible at it, but his size definitely limited him, even though he was a compact player. But yeah, Gus, I think that he might be, Ken, when you're talking about those first or second down passing situations, as far as pass protection, that might get him on the field more.
Yeah, well, I think that's certainly possible. He should be on the field plenty anyway. I don't want to jinx this anyway to a little bit, but I certainly hope Dobbins is not considering holding out. But if that became a situation, and then Keaton Mitchell really becomes a guy that the Ravens are depending on a lot, and I think he'll basically be an early down back, because early down backfield back. I think he could be a later down guy. You can really confuse a defensive coordinator with why he's on the field and try and make him send in a different personnel package for that, because you have a lot of pony options with a guy who's that kind of speed and that kind of playmaking ability. But if for some reason JK decides he doesn't want to play or he wants to come back for the last 6 games or whatever it might be, I think that would be unfortunate. Obviously, I don't think it will help Dobbins in terms of his contract status for next year. But I think that would really put the focus on Gus to be a pass blocker when Mitchell and Hill are the 2 other opportunities. Now, Hill's been okay as a pass blocker, I think, and that's why he's been out there on 3rd down. But I don't think they want to expand him to, half the carries either. So it means that, with Mitchell, you're going to have him on the field or get somebody else on some early downs, and it will put a strain on the offense if that is the case.
Yes, I'm not mentally prepared for JK to miss games to hold out by holding out. I don't think it does him any good. But the running backs are in a no-win situation here. If you either have too many miles on you or you held out, maybe there's some character questions. It's a tough situation for the running backs. And I agree with you on, you brought up Justice Hill there. I went back to look to see what kind of role that he may have. And something that struck me from last season, Ken, was that even when Gus and JK were banged up, I thought Justice Hill could have gotten more carries and he didn't. Talking about, he only had a high of 8 carries last year, Justice Hill, we're speaking of. And I went back and I'm like, okay, well, I remember that Pittsburgh game, the last game of 2019 when RG3 started and they, obviously were protecting Ingram. I remember Justice Hill got a bunch of carries in that game, and I went back and looked, and it was 10. Yeah. That's his career high of 10 carries. So I don't think the Ravens view him, after what I saw last year, as somebody that can handle 15 carries a game. So yes, Gus is an important player to this team, not only from Dobbins' standpoint, but also for how they've used Justice Hill.
I'm not sure this team has a 20 carry per game back, or even one that. I'll say this: I think the number of 20 carry games this season for all backs combined will be, say, 2 or less. I don't think that, and I'd like to look back and see even how it was during the Roman era. I don't think they've had a bunch of them, during that time. Probably Edwards has had a few, but I just don't recall them right off the top of my head. Anyway, we'll see how Monken runs things differently, because obviously I would think there'd be more total passing plays, fewer, maybe not distinctly fewer run plays, because I think there's going to be more offensive plays in general as they play faster. Also allow more offensive plays for the opponent, which is probably, something they really need to consider. And then, it may mean the run plays are almost as high and all the incremental plays are passes, but it probably means a little fewer in the run department.
Agreed. So that brings us to something, or brings me to something I wanted to speak with you about on this pod, and that's how you expect the Ravens to deploy a healthy JK and Gus during this season. Just talking about those two as the main carriers of the ball, because something tells me, Ken, just a hunch, that Monken will be more reliant on JK than Greg Roman was. Squeaky wheel gets the grease is a factor, but also looking at a contract year for JK, maybe the Ravens want to feature him finally. Famously, he doesn't think he gets the ball enough. And I think with Greg Roman, there was a real balance there between, okay, maybe JK gets the first 2 series, then Gus gets the next series, that kind of thing. What kind of split do you expect? Because I kind of expect JK to be more of a lead back and not a 1A, 1B type situation.
Could certainly be the case. And if you're talking about who can adapt to 11 personnel better, I think that's the real question, because I think we'll see a lot more of that early in games from the Ravens, that they'll be going to a lot more 11. There will be some 12. I don't think they'll take that out of the offense. But I think that more of what they do with the heavier packages, 21, 22, 12 even, I think 13 sometimes, I think we'll see when the Ravens have the lead. And I think, you want Edwards to salt away games. So it may even be a case that it really makes sense. You go back to the 1980s, and the Redskins had, I believe they had Ernest Biner at that point, and they had Ricky Irvins for the second half. They would bring it, and they just split the carries by half. Gibbs would bring Irvins in the second half, and he would be very effective against a worn out defense a little bit. With Edwards, if you're trying to salt the game away with a power back, and then you also want to include some passing from Lamar with that, then maybe you go to the pistol in the second half. You run with Edwards, you make Lamar the outside threat again. I actually think Lamar's more effective as the inside threat, but you can also balance it with some carries for each. But it may be that Edwards gets more carries of the lead and Dobbins gets more carries when the game is still within a closer range or early.
I kind of think so. I kind of think the other reason for that is the talent of J.K. Dobbins.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to be running on a fewer percentage of plays, maybe you want to maximize those carries with J.K., whereas Roman knew he was going to be running the ball from the start of the game to the end of the game if the game went well, and wanted to manage those carries among two people, spread them out more among two people. So, yeah, something tells me, Ken, that J.K. is going to be the RB1, not 1A and Gus 1B, which would leave Gus's role, made me kind of hard to pencil in the expectations here with a new offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it's fair. This is a legitimate question. I would not think the Ravens would look at it towards maximizing who JK is specifically. It's a contract year for both of them. They want to get high rate statistics from both of them. And, whoever I think is playing the best, you keep feeding him the ball. Hopefully neither of the running back, given the amount of carries we hope they will still have, is going to be too upset with the amount of production opportunity they get. You never know. I mean, JK has been fairly squeaky about it. Edwards has been fairly unsqueaky about it in terms of what's going on. But I think both of them probably are at a point where they would like to have a little security beyond this season. I know that's, JK has made no bones about it. Edwards probably feels the same way. We've heard already from Zeitler. We've heard already from Queen. The Ravens just have not a lot of money to give out in terms of long-term contracts right now. And I think everybody pretty much that I just named has to wait till the end of the year, and probably most of 3 out of 4 at least will get paid by another team.
Yes, and of course, Gus Edwards wants the ball. I don't want to paint it this way, but something else to consider, Ken. His contract was altered in March, and basically, his cap hit was cut in half. Went from 5.6 something to 2.8 something. Created 2.654. He took a $900K pay cut, which can be earned back in incentives. So Gus,
didn't that add void years too? So it's not like, okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I maybe I'm not understanding the point, so I don't want to jump to the conclusion. But what's the point about that?
The point is, the pay cut part I took straight from Jamison Hensley tweet that 900K pay cut in there, which can be earned back in incentives. That was directly from a tweet when I did research on it. What I'm saying is Gus did get paid, and that deal looks very smart for Gus Edwards right now. The one that he signed. That he's coming up on the end of. So as far as a security situation, JK really hasn't made his money compared to the money that Gus has made. So, yes, I do think that the Ravens don't want to create any problems. I think JK is the more talented back. I think he's the more versatile back when you're talking about some of the stretch zone that Monken may want to employ here. JK can run outside the tackles, between the tackles. So I really think that he'll be featured here over Gus. And it may be a situation in which you're talking about where Gus is brought in to close out some of these games.
Yeah. Yep. What else do we want to talk about for 2023? Monken's scheme, I think we kind of hit on. I think whether or not he can find a role in the receiving game. We haven't seen what Monken's offense looks like. We've heard some very good comments he's made that seems to really convey an understanding of what might be successful. But we've also kind of got to see some of it in terms of understand what the role will be for players like Duvernay or Likely or even Beckham and others within the offense. What are they trying to do with Flowers in order to take safety help off the top and clear space? How are they designating first and second reads so that Lamar's intentionally spreading the ball more and decreasing the number of marginal targets to the favored receivers? All of that, it's possible within it that Gus Edwards finds a role. It just seems like if you're talking about how can how can you find a role for a guy like that? Finding a receiving role for Gus Edwards actually pretty far down the list. So I would think that, finding a receiving role for J.K. Dobbins, for example, would be a much more significant part of what Monken would try and build into a playbook that he's building for this personnel group.
Agreed. And JK needs to catch the ball.
Yeah.
Got to catch the ball because JK in open space is deadly. And, again, I'll come back to Gus here. Gus has showed pretty good hands. Obviously very, very limited sample size. But you get Gus out there in the flat with some cornerback trying to fight off a block and tackle him, and some linebacker with a bad angle, or undersized safety. That's no fun either. So, that would when we get to expectations, I'm holding something back here again, but yeah, it'd be very interesting to see what happens with the passing game, because I think we will see more designed passes to the running back. We almost have to by default.
Probably. I mean, if it's part of the horizontal stretching out of 11, where you're not doing it all from sidecar and with motion and with counters and whatnot. I mean, there's multiple ways to do it, but if you want to keep your linemen in place where they might pass block, you probably don't want to run counter all the time. And they can pass out a counter, with Jackson, but it's not the ideal situation I think they want. So it does limit one of the tools they have to stretch the field horizontally. So they, will have to find other ways to do it, and go into the side to a back, releasing, for a swing pass instead of something where he's coming through the mesh point to do it is a perfectly reasonable way to try and get that accomplished. So we'll see. I think, it's been mentioned by a number of guests on this show that they think that Monken is as committed to horizontally stretching the field as he is to vertically. I think probably what the big change we'll see is in the vertical, and the horizontal will probably be less challenged than was under Roman, because that was the primary element of the Roman game, was really horizontal stretching to make a stretch out the defense into a thin rubber band across 53 1/3 yards, and see if you can puncture through that at a point of attack with additional power. And he was very good at scheming that up. I think we're going to see some commitment to horizontal stretching, but I don't see how it could be as much with Monken.
Yes, I agree. I mean, Greg Roman, we're familiar with how he did it with Duvernay, whether it would be on a jet sweep or a short screen out to Duvernay with the two tight ends blocking for him. It's more, it took Greg Roman a while to get to that deep overpass that was really, really effective for him at times when he ran it with Sammy, and we saw it with Deshaun Jackson at a big moment in the Jacksonville game. But yeah, I agree. The vertical stretching vertically, I think Nelson Aguilar can help with that too as well. A good ball tracker. He's very good at tracking the ball. So you send Aguilar, straight up the field from the slot. It may be a different look for Lamar, maybe a more trust factor than he had with Duvernay in the same role.
Okay. All right. We'll see about that. Let's get back to a good season here. What is a good season for Gus Edwards?
Sure. I have active for 15 plus games. So I'm going to put a health disclaimer on there. I expect, your backs to get a little beat up. Maybe he gets rested a game, that kind of thing, or twist an ankle. But for the most part, a durable season, 15 plus games. Also had only behind J.K. Dobbins in carries. I think that would be a very good season for him if he can fend off some of the speed backs that we have in Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell. And here's the key one, Ken. Love to hear your comment on this. His play makes the team want him back in 2024.
Sure.
Not saying
that would do it.
Not saying they can agree on a price. But my side to this one is, Ken, is pretty simple. I think JK will go where the money goes. I think JK will be desired as much as a running back can be these days, but I don't expect J.K. Dobbins to be back. Justice Hill, we mentioned the confidence the coaching staff has in him, seems to be more as a gunner on special teams than as a carrier of the ball. He's cuttable next year. You don't know what you have with Keaton Mitchell yet or any other back. So if I had to guess among the three backs, that we have, the top three backs, who is most likely to be back carrying the football for the Ravens next year, I would actually say Gus. Has a higher percentage. So a good year for me is Gus looks like Gus, and the team says, you know what, let's try to make an offer We have the void year out there. Let's forget about that for a second, and just make sure he's part of the team here in 2024.
Yeah, I think that makes very good logical sense. And I would agree of the 4 players we named of Queen, Edwards, Dobbins, and who's it, Zeitler. I think he's clearly the guy who's most likely to resign. He's probably the most affordable. If you toss in Broderick Washington and Matabike, I might slip Washington to the top of the list of resignables and have Edwards number 2. But I put Matabike in the very unlikely to be re-signed at this point. We'll see, but it would address a need, but we'll see. And I think you're probably right also in the notion that the Ravens, since they need to keep one back, probably or would like to keep one back, particularly if Mitchell doesn't just erupt for a pretty solid year, where shows some durability, of some ability to take a significant carry load and whatnot. That I think they're probably going to want to have another back returning. And I think they should be, if they're not, pretty well fed up from the veteran running back treadmill, because it's worked out even worse than the veteran wide receiver treadmill at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gus just strikes me as the kind of guy that, okay, he's worked with the team already before the season. Maybe you don't want to turn over the entire backfield, mesh point, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
Have some confidence in Gus and say, look, even if Gus loses a half a step here as he's, getting close to 30 years old, that we still want to have that safety net of a veteran back we know works hard, shows up to practice. So a good season for me. The team would want him back as they draft and get younger at that position.
Let me go ahead with my definition of a good season. It's similar, but I don't have the same kind of expectation in terms of durability. I said remains on the efficient frontier of breakaway percentage and Yakko per attempt. Okay, so he should be either good at both of them, or great and okay, or great at Yakko again and okay at breakaway percentage. But anyway, on that efficient frontier of those two statistics, minimal concessions to age as a runner. I'm expecting some. Honestly, as great as he's been in the 4 of 5 years he's played so far, I would think this is a year where we would likely see decline if he gets a full workload. And part of what I'm saying in terms of durability is that he returns to 140 plus touches, so receiving and running, this year on an offense that runs more total plays. So maybe this is a case where he gets 10 targets. I guess I'm really talking targets plus attempts, 14 targets, something like that, but also 125 to 140 rushes as well, and then continues to run effectively, hopefully. But I don't have a specific game expectation. He got 140 carries, I think, in his first year in 11 games, right? When he came in.
It was 137 in 11 games. So
yeah. And he only started 6 of those. And I think he might have really only had serious playing time in the last 7 that Jackson was the quarterback.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So what's a great season to you?
Great season to me. I put the 5.0 yards per carry yet again. It is just an unknown with the new system. So if he can average 5.0 yards per carry, not only in Roman's system, but in Monken's system, that's a great year to me. And finally getting to I think that a great year to me would be he has a dozen receptions. I set the number at a dozen. And to me, what that would indicate, Ken, I think you said it really well earlier in the show, a design pass on first or second down. Mm-hmm. Not that, maybe Justice Hill still retains his role as the third down back. But, okay, we have these free yards we can get to set us up on a nice distance on second and 6, second and 4. So 1st and 10. Let's swing it out to Gus. We know he's going to, bull his way through, if not make somebody make life miserable on some poor DB trying to tackle him. And instead of running the ball in creative ways like Greg Roman would do to create those positive first downs, Gus catches a dozen balls. His career high, by the way, is 9. Yep. He has 18 total receptions in his career. So although 12 catches is a pretty modest number, to me, that would say great season.
Big jump forward.
Big jump forward, yes. That we trust him throwing the ball to Gus.
Yeah, I didn't put that kind of a limit on him, but it'd be terrific if he gets a number of targets that were like that. It means that Monken has found a role for him in the passing game, or at least is trying to. and is probing at opposing defenses, and frankly, seeing what Edwards has as a receiver. I think the way you put it is good. It's really an extension of the run game as you've described it. That would be, I think, a particularly low yards per target as described. That's more like what Patrick Ricard would do as a receiver, 4 to 5 yards per play here, which is fine if you have a very high percentage of completions and a high percentage of getting approximately that number of yards. But it's not fine if it's a lot of zeros to go with a few tens kind of thing. And I think Edwards is probably, you're not putting him in the best position to make him stop to make a reception. And then, part of the great thing about Gus is he gets to level 2 with a full head of steam where first contact occurs, because the offensive line with Roman schemes got him there. And that's what is creating a lot of that great yakko. If you put him out on the edge and all of a sudden, he's reaching somewhere to get the football, and then he has to turn back upfield and get started again, not the ideal kind of situation, not the ideal use of Edwards' power out there. So what I would hope is that they use him on some wheel routes, some unusual routes that we haven't seen before, that get him open maybe as a third receiving threat through a zone. We've seen those kind of plays before. By the way, I'm going to go on a little bit of tangent here. Ray Lewis, when he was on the goal line beginning at 2nd and 5 for the 49ers in the Super Bowl, his last 3 defensive plays, one of them, he covered the kind of route I'm talking about, where it's a clear out route, and Frank Gore was the 3rd or 4th receiving option through that spot. The play is clearly designed for Gore if you watch it. Ray Lewis was right on top of it. The ball went out to Crabtree. Jimmy Smith about took his head off on the play. And I think people will remember that about the play. What they don't remember is this incredible contribution Ray Lewis did to diagnose what was going on and be in the right spots. That wasn't just an easy walk-in touchdown for Gore. This is the kind of offense where, because they'll have vertical threats, because they'll have some middle of the field crossing threats, because linebackers have to worry about Lamar himself, that Edwards in space like that, particularly after clearouts have occurred and as a late release, maybe after a chip block, could be quite dangerous. And I'd love to see some plays schemed for that, where it's really the first read and you're really worrying about finding space to make that throw, or finding time to make that late throw.
Yes, I love those plays, especially when the quarterback gives the token pump fake to the receiver that's, gaining all the attention. So just imagine Zay Flowers has burnt you on a couple of bubble screens or something like that, some explosive guy. And, you give the Zay Flowers just turns around, looks for the ball. Lamar gives him a pump fake. He has no intention to throw into Flowers. It just draws everybody up, and Gus sneaks out the level 2, a nice little touch on it. But yes, it would be nice. I don't know how many fans really care about this. I mean, I think that they're really focused on the passing game, but I think it would be really nice to get these big backs out there with some kind of receptions. And again, if Gus was the lead back, that number would be higher for me, Ken. I just don't know what kind of role that he's going to have. But you mentioned it beautifully. Even if it's not you have to connect on those plays, because they're not explosive plays. You don't expect them to be explosive plays. They're keeping the sticks moving, keeping your offense on schedule type of plays. So that would show real growth in this offense. Overall, if Gus has a dozen catches, that means JK can probably do it too. I mean, some good timing, some good scheming, and a good way to get cheap yards outside of just running up the middle or, relying on your offensive line to create those yards for you.
Did you conclude with your great season? Was that you had a dozen receptions was the last thing, right?
That was it. Yes. Sorry, okay. Ken. Yep.
No. I just want to make sure you're done. I didn't interrupt you in responding to that, but great season for me, 15 plus regular season games. So that's basically, you had that in the good category. I actually think that would be terrific if he could do that. Continues his fine streak of durability with basically being able to play those 15 games and not, having restrictions that are limiting to a few carries, coming back and off and on, injuries and all that stuff. Really, I'm hoping he could play 15 games effectively. Here's the big thing. We got to see if he can thrive in 11 personnel. So can Monken scheme up a way that Edwards doesn't become less than he was before without Ricard? or without some of the other deception necessarily that goes with having Lamar Jackson. So they've got to find a way to make him effective in 11. I'm sure he'll be effective in 12. I'm sure he'll be fine if they have 21 on the field. But I want to see him effective in 11 personnel because I think there's going to be a lot of it. And the heavier packages, they will return. I think Patrick Ricard is still going to have a role on this team. They will return when the Ravens are trying to close out games. Needs to beat Father Time out by effectively matching his career productivity in the important metrics. So what I'm talking about there is Yakko and yards per attempt in total over 5, like you said. And if he's up there at his normal kind of a Yakko level, that would be fine. And, the biggest thing of all is that he finally gets to have a deep playoff run. A lot of players on the Ravens don't have good playoff records. Kevin Zeitler is 0-5 in the playoffs in his career. But Edwards is 1-4, and he's been one of the guys who's been here for the whole time, along with Andrews, along with Jackson, of course. And it'd be nice to see all those guys get a deep playoff run, particularly in the case of departing players who won't necessarily have another chance to play for a winner again.
I feel like we're due, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
We just, it's just been a tough couple of years, and hopefully, it's just like that 2021 season was so devastating that there was a hangover into 2022 with health, with Ronnie, with JK. Even if you want to say Roman's offense kind of stalling out, and it just feels like all the good karma is coming towards us, hopefully.
The defense all was there in the second half. Basically, this team was Lamar Jackson away from being a very serious Super Bowl contender, which is a hell of a long way away when you're dropping off to Tyler Huntley at quarterback. And I'm not trying to shame Tyler in this way. It's just you lose Lamar Jackson like you lose anybody who's critical to your offense. You're gone. Ronnie Stanley, he was good enough for the Ravens to win last year. He wasn't the greatest we've ever seen him, but he was certainly good enough for the Ravens to be there last year. I know it was frustrating to the Ravens in 22. It was probably frustrating in 20 how that season ended up ending in Buffalo with some of the goal line interception and whatnot. I'm sure it was clearly upsetting what happened with Tyler in there when they put up a great fight against the Bengals to lose the game the way they did. But boy, they are due. They really need to have that.
It seems like it. You got your franchise quarterback hurt 2 years in a row to end the season, and the injuries overall in 2021. It just seems like a lot of bad luck, man. So I'm hopeful for this season. I'm really excited, and I think that there's something to be said for a new offensive coordinator. And the NFL has never seen Todd Monken with Lamar Jackson. What is the game plan? It might take the league a half year before they start to get that down. I think all of that kind of works in the Ravens' favors, man. So fingers crossed.
All righty, man. Let's move on to Octavius Robinson here. Very interesting draft pick. I didn't see it coming, but 6'6", 257, long arms, 23 bench reps. That's grown man strength coming out of school. He is 24 already. So he turned 24 actually in January. So he's really 24 3/4 when the season begins, or 24 2/3. He comes out of the same area of Canada. It's in the Toronto area. Actually, if you looked at like how much of the population is right along the border, I think people know in general that most of the Canadian population is within a few miles of the American border and whatnot. But the other thing is that a huge percentage of population is right in the Toronto area. And all the towns, you hear the Hamilton Tiger Cats, or Hamilton is basically a suburb of Toronto. It's just a little bit out of the city. And he came from Guelph Collegiate Vocational Institute in Ontario. Then he went to the University of Guelph, and then the last 3 years at Ole Miss, of course, where he showed up on tape. Tell us a little bit. I know he was on your list.
He was on my list under the draftable. It wasn't someone that I was coveting that day. But I think that it really tells us a little bit about where this defense is going, and that us as Ravens fans, we have to kind of condition ourselves away from maybe some of the more traditional Ravens defenses we've seen, and definitely the non-wink defense, the transition away from wink, because when we were looking at linebackers for this draft, I was looking at guys who could play Sam and that kind of thing, because you have a way that on the rush end, and Ojabo on the rush end, and hey, maybe Houston comes back. He's a rush
Rush
defender,
end. Yeah.
rush end, and Tavius Robinson. If you want to look at him in Wink's defense, he would be another rush end. But I think what you're looking at with Mike McDonald is you're expected for rushing. You're facing 11 personnel on the other team, so you're going to have your 5 DBs. They seem hell bent on playing PQ and Roquan together in the middle of that, more zone defense. And what does that leave? That leaves your 4 guys up front just getting after the quarterback. So I think we have to, like the Sam linebacker in the Ravens scheme is becoming a little less important, a little more antiquated a term. Not saying that they won't face 12 personnel, but when you look at, I look at Tavius more as a strong side defensive end, Ken, than the Sam linebacker.
Fair enough. Obviously they need to get through all the snaps, and Tyus Bowser is one of a kind in terms of his ability to drop into coverage. But it's not just about how they deal with the tight end and who exactly is covering. It's about the flexibility for the pass rush. And if you can drop Tyus Bowser off the line of scrimmage and have him take meaningful coverage responsibilities, whether it's running back, tight end, short zone, whatever it might be, and that allows you to create another overload or blitz Patrick Queen or blitz Roquan or send a safety, send the slot corner, whatever it might be. I mean, just have a lot more flexibility when your Sam linebacker can drop. And that's what's so important to the Ravens. They had an embarrassment of riches when they had Bowser and Judon together and all the things they could do with that. And so you can't ever really expect that again. But I have to expect a second Sam linebacker who can do a couple of the 3 responsibilities important. Rush the passer himself, play good edge defense, and drop the cover. Of those 3 things, I want somebody who can do 2. Vince Beagle might have been that guy last year, didn't make it through in terms of the injury. But, the Ravens are going to have to try and find somebody to do that role. And I really hope they don't go back to Oweh there, because I think it will limit Oweh, the pass rusher, to such a degree to be messed up with pass rush responsibilities on a differing by down or differing by series basis that I really don't want to see that.
Yeah, and again, maybe this is something that you and I don't see completely eye to eye on because, I agree about Oweh. By the way,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't regarding Oweh.
Mm-hmm.
He's better. He's best. I want to see him getting after the passer and not dropping into coverage. I was simply saying that under McDonald, it seems like the blitzes were more simplistic. It was either, your slot corner blitz coming off the slot, or it was some combination of Roquan or Patrick Queen coming up the middle. And there wasn't this, okay, well, we got 5 across. Which 4 are coming, or are all 5 coming? Who's dropping into coverage? It was more like, hey, these are our 4 big boys up front, and they're coming for you. So I see Tavius as more like playing like the JPP type role that we saw last year, hand in the dirt, strong side defensive end, and going away from the Sam linebacker. So I don't know if that's something that we'll totally agree on there, but I see a soft zone behind that. The McDonald's zone defense.
So let's talk a little bit about Tavius's potential as a run stopper, because one of the things I'd say Oweh is he really looks like a situational pass rusher to me as a rookie. Now, the Ravens don't have a lot of other choices, but they do have one that they used last year, is to eat some early down. Well, they eat some early down snaps very effectively with JPP, but they also ate some early down snaps before they had a number of outside linebackers who could even step on the field with Malik Harrison.
Yes. And I think that this was something that was up and down for Tavius. And I think his height at 6'6" works against him in that run defense, Ken. I think it was more of a leverage issue. You mentioned the grown man strength with the long arms and the bench press. I see it there, and I saw it on several plays where he's just controlling the guy and too strong for the tackle that's trying to block him. But too many plays. I went back and watched the Kentucky game before the show, and just too many times he's losing the battle of leverage. He's 6'6". There's better form from the guy that's blocking him, and he's getting uprooted and moved around a little too much because of it. So I think that that's something that he's going to have to focus on. I think that's going to be a major focus for him and the coaching staff, is to get him becoming a strong edge setter.
Yeah. The game that I spent time watching again before the episode was that Texas Tech loss in the Texas Bowl. Yeah, it was the Texas Bowl. They had 90 defensive snaps in that game. Ole Miss did. He played 60 of them. So he's definitely been on the field enough at times. He had a great game there. It got stood up a couple times on short scoring runs, which is part of what I'm seeing is just probably loses that battle a little more than he should. You can be very tall and have very long arms and get consistently excellent leverage. Look at Brent Urban, for example, if you want a player like that who's very good. And a lot of taller, defensive ends are in that category as well, as particularly ones who are 4-3 ends. But you can also just not be particularly good at that. Hopefully that's something Chuck Smith will help him do, and he can become, Chuck Smith can become a run edge setting whisperer as well, and not just a pass rush guy, which we'd love to see. But he looked great in that game. He did get off to the quarterback very effectively, high motor, chasing down Tyler Shuck, rolling left on an extended play, and just lots to like about him as a pass rusher. Also really goes for the club, which is one of the nice things. The number one guy, Anderson, had one forced fumble and 34 college sacks. And Tavius Robinson, I think, was close to the NCAA lead. He's third in the NCAA lead with 4 forced fumbles in 22, first in the SEC. So if you believe in big conference performances, then that's pretty nice.
David Ajabo is another one. That's what I love about him is he's always hunting the ball in the quarterback's arm. It's not just about the sack, but yes, Tavius, his hustle stood out. He's a linear athlete, which is part of the reason I remember on draft day, you and I say, man, he doesn't play Sam. You know what? That's another rush end. But his size, I think he's got a little bit room for bulk too, Ken. 6'6", 257. So maybe he muscles up a little bit. Calais Campbell's another tall guy. I was thinking of when you were talking there, excellent against the run, just great against the run at 6'8". So Tavius, hopefully some pro coaching. And, you mentioned his time at, what was it, Guelph University?
Yeah.
Hopefully the Ravens can teach the run a little bit better here than they did at Guelph. So he's got some room to grow mentally and physically. And, also with run defense, Ken, you mentioned his motor. The 1-2 is more than half the battle on run defense. So you expect him to have that kind of mindset where he come from in Canada, that he's not going to pull one of those, I'm here to rush the passer. I don't really care about rush defense. He's going to care.
Let's hope he looks like Pernell McPhee in the preseason then, because, Pernell McPhee had probably among the 3 or 4 greatest preseasons ever by a Raven in 2011. And he interviewed him after last game. He had like some sort of turnover-worthy play pretty much in every game to that point. And he said, well, I'm just trying to make the team. Hope I can make the team as a 5th-round pick. And Harbaugh was interviewed next. He goes, well, he's made the team. That's pretty obvious. So,
he'll get a chance. He'll get a chance this preseason. Definitely get used to the speed of the game. There's plenty of playing time, even though there's only one cut down this year, Ken. So it kind of allows the coaches to really rest the guys that they want to rest, that probably are going to be a big part of some kind of rotation. But Tavius, you get them used to the speed of the game. And, maybe the Ravens bring in an extra edge rusher. I would kind of expect them to. I would kind of put that at over 50%, considering there's only really 4 proven edge players, and one of them's a rookie, and one of them only played 2 games last year, and Ajabo 1-2 games. So yeah, Ken, it's going to be an interesting preseason for Tavius.
Great point on bringing in another edge rusher, because I think that the chances are pretty good as well. I think you've got the percentage just about correct. I'd say over 50%. It might be a case where if Houston skips camp, the Ravens might have decided by the end of camp, if Tavius Robinson looks fantastic, that, you know what, we're good. And they don't want to sign Houston to a deal that might cost them $5 or $6 million, $7 million with incentives kind of thing to do that. I mean, I think Houston was within range of making a really big number with 10 sacks, right? I think
I haven't thought about that in a while, Ken, but that sounds right.
But so, not that he wasn't worth it. He was terrific last year, but if they're looking for an outside linebacker, they have a couple different options. You can go the JPP route, probably again. I don't think he's been signed yet by anybody. And if you do, then you have a guy who can eat some early down snaps, very balanced run pass defender, does a lot of things well, gets his arms up well to try to flex some balls. So you got a lot of things he can provide you, but he's not a pure pass rusher the way Houston is anymore. Or you can go with Robinson and try and get him more playing time, because if Houston is on the team and the other guys are all healthy, I see a lot of deactivations for Tavius Robinson.
Yes.
He'll sit some games.
Yes, part of what made the expectations so tough for me on this one. I'm sure you had some other players that are, the cornerback room or whatever, where the expectations are hard to gather. But yeah, when I was sitting there writing the expectations, I'm like, well, if we re-sign an outside linebacker, my expectations are this, and if we don't, my expectations are that. So I had to be careful with the wording on that for Tavius.
Yeah. So what else do we have? I had a lot of stuff on whether or not he's a Sam candidate. I will say, there is one thing about him being a Sam candidate that I won't rule it out yet. He has a similar 40 time to a Tyus Bowser, and obviously that's not at all what it's about. I'm just saying his long speed is not so detrimental. He's probably a little bit faster, for example, than Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton certainly can play some short zone defense certifiably. He's got the same kind of, more height and a hulking presence that an underneath zone guy, if he really understood what was going on behind him, he could give quarterbacks fits in terms of reading them. But that's usually exactly the issue for an outside linebacker who's dropping to zone, is he doesn't know exactly how to read the quarterback in that situation or what's going on behind him. I think that, it's not absolutely impossible, but I think it's probably a multi-year project to get him there as a Sam if they did it. I see him as a situational pass rusher this year.
I agree. I don't see him as a Sam candidate, just because actually one of my draft notes was his 4.6, 640 is not measuring his lateral quickness at all. I thought that he was a very linear player, more in the Adafio way than the David Ajabo mode, say, where it's straight ahead speed. But if you look at, pass rush to pass rush, the lateral quickness, the lateral mobility of David Ajabo is on another level, even though Adafi would be the faster player, quote unquote. Same thing with Tavius, fast player, downhill. But yeah, back in the open field or something like that, or a slot receiver trying to stick with him, I just don't see it. I agree with you. I expect him to be brought here to stop the run and get after the passer.
All right. Well, maybe we talk about what a good and a great season is, unless you've got other comments to make about Chuck Smith or, Chuck Smith can improve everybody's toolkit. One of the nice things about Robinson is actually comes in with a pretty good toolkit. Came out of the SEC, had 6 sacks there. It was 8th in the conference, and that's the conference you want to be 8th in terms of sacks. So that's pretty good. Everybody is going to learn from Chuck Smith, I hope. But Tavius Robinson, you certainly can pick up some things, I'm sure, from Chuck, even though he's in a pretty good position to start with. Absolutely.
So for me, a good season. I just want to start in chunks with them. I don't want to put any kind of numbers on this just because of the uncertainty of who we may add to the room. So I would say becomes a plus edge defender would be a good year. I think he has the tools. He has the want to become to translate immediately as a good run defender, kind of way Adafio Way was drafted to be. Hey, maybe a project in the pass rushing, but let's get you on the field and let's see you flash as a good edge defender. And also said high motor flashes. So plus edge defender, somebody we can go into next year saying, we know Tavius can set the edge. We're confident in that going into 2024. And we keep seeing that high motor flash, Ken.
Yeah, that obviously is a very big deal, and something in terms of pursuit and the pass rush that he definitely really showed up in college. I've got a little bit different good season. I think he is the Ravens' clear choice as the 5th outside linebacker. That's a good season. That's one of the conditions I have. He's 4th on the current roster. That's pretty clear. The release of Dalen Hayes. You don't know who else the team's going to pick up. The team could pick up 2 guys. They could be he's a 5th outside linebacker, but he's so far down that he's not quite on the practice squad because they don't want to take a risk of losing him. But he's also never really at risk of getting activations, or never really has a chance for activations. So I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for like a grade off to being the 5th outside linebacker, where it's pretty close. They'd like to get him there. Ideally, he makes some sort of special teams contribution that helps him get some activations. And the obvious one that I could see for him would be if he's on the field goal block team. Nothing else really makes sense. I don't think he's going to be on either kick coverage or return team. Not impossible. He could play the back end with Ricard in terms of some kickoff returns, but that's a pretty limited role anyway. I don't really see much that he'd be doing on the punt team. If they did use him as a wing, that's where they use Tim Williams and Tyus Bowser at times. I guess that's a possibility in terms of a place on the punt team, the punt coverage team, where they would use him. But I think it's actually fairly limited, the options. He needs to produce as a situational pass rusher. He needs to produce some pressures that create opportunities for other players, and he needs to create a couple finishes off first pressure. I'm not expecting to see really anything in terms of he beats his guy straight up for a sack. I think the Ravens have so little of that in their offense, and frankly, it's so little a part of NFL sacks these days when you don't have the truly elite Aaron Donald, TJ Watt, JJ Watt a few years ago kind of guys that I think you don't even really look for that. You look for guys who make the quarterback uncomfortable and can finish him when they're teed up a little bit by some other schematic element. And that's fine for me. I'm getting some feedback from you, Jason, right now, but I just want to be clear about that. And then I wanted to find. I'm sorry. I think the only other thing I have for a good season is his strength is adequate for the NFL game at 24. If it's not, that's a big concern because I don't think he's going to grow into his body a lot more. So an NFL weight room, how they always talk about that with rookies, not necessarily going to be the advantage for him that it will be for others who are behind the curve in terms of where their strength is right now.
There you go. I love it. I love the comments on special teams. Completely agree. I think wing is a kind of a long shot, but possible. But yeah, field goal block, that would be great if he could get himself. And I love the way you put it, no worse than fifth. So if we bring somebody else in, that's still Tavius' spot. We'd love to get him active on game day, even if it's a numbers game when we can't. But that's his spot. We definitely have a role for him on the team if everybody else wasn't so healthy and everybody else wasn't doing so great. So love the way you put that.
How about a great season? What does that look for Tavius?
I want to see from a great season would be that he shows some pass rush ability on the inside. I think that he has that ability as a sub rusher to come in and give guards some trouble with his length and his straight ahead burst, kind of like what we saw with Adafio Way last year, being so effective from that 4-4-eye position on sub rushing. To me, a great season would be okay. Yes, okay. So he becomes a plus edge defender. The good, you have to be the good to get to the great. So we know he can set the edge. Hey, maybe he still has some work to do to polish his game as an outside rusher, but just based on physical traits and Chuck Smith's coaching the first year, hey, we got something on the inside with him too. So, he's flashing both in all three phases of the game, say as a sub rusher, edge rusher, and also a run defender.
Okay, very good. I think that would certainly qualify as a great season the way you've defined it there. I defined it a little differently. And I'll start with this play in camp in the preseason screams for a role. I mentioned McPhee 2011. I actually got in there, so I kind of stole my own thunder there. But if you think about him, that would be terrific. If he plays 250 plus snaps in 10 plus activations, I think that would be great. He needs to bring pass rush scheme flexibility to McDonald's defense. And I mean a couple of things there. Kick inside is probably the biggest in terms of he doesn't see a big degradation in terms of what he does. I think one of the things he can do from the inside that could be very valuable is crossing the face on stunts, crossing between two players, and being the pick player as an under. He could probably do some over as well, but those under guys often are the ones who end up getting the good opportunity. And so I think he could be that. I think that'd be an opportunity for him to actually get home some. I want him to have a personal pressure rate that is solid and create second man opportunities. So that's similar to what I had in the first one. Second man opportunities and some for himself in a cleanup role. And then one other way to contribute, and I'm not picky, is what I've been saying about other players when we have this. I'll take batted balls, a contribution to turnovers in other ways, whether he's punching out some fumbles or falling on them, some decent play as a Sam linebacker, where we say, hey, wait a minute, this looks pretty good for Tavius Robinson. And we're saying, okay, maybe we were wrong about this whole Sam thing. And then also playing the run better than expected. I think you're in a better place with him against the run than I am. I think that's pretty clear from the way we've described both of this. I see him as pretty much a situational pass rusher. You're hoping he gets to that run defense. Well, I hope he gets there too. I think it's a great season if he could do that. And it's only one of the other possible paths he has to get there is being a better than expected run defender.
Yes. Well said, Ken. Yeah, I expect him a little bit extra weight, a little bit extra focus on it, better coaching. I think he's got the body to be able to set the edge, and I think that's his number one path. They're going to tell him, look, if you can't play the run, we got Adafio Way, we got David Ajabo rushing the passer here. This is going to be their gig. You better be able to set the run if you want to get on the field. And I think that's his main focus. And I saw the same things like we talked about earlier in college of him getting uprooted too much. He's too big, too strong to get uprooted that much. And I think it has to do with his height. And I think better form, a more conscious effort on his form, staying low, getting long will go. I think he'll do better. Yeah, I do. I'm kind of higher on that than most, I would say, in his ability to stop the run.
We'll be looking at it. I'm sure he'll be one of the players we get a good look at in preseason. Of course, we won't know. Hit your mute button for a second here because the feedback is getting pretty heavy on me. But he'll be one of the players that will get a lot of playing time in the preseason, but it will also be in the second half. So we'll have the question of, these two left tackles or these two tackles, they probably won't even be on the field during the regular season and may not be on a roster anyway during the regular season. And we'll have those questions that'll naturally accrue. Would be kind of nice if he got some first half exposure in that preseason.
Yes, there you go. I think the preseason's big for him. He's all the rookies really, but especially for Tavius to find a role on this team because attrition is something else, man. So we're going to need him for something, chances are, during the season. We just don't know what.
Jason, always a pleasure to talk football with you. Just great to have you on. The level of excitement, the level of understanding of the game, and just I really like the way you challenge thought when we're here. We have what I think are actually fairly mild differences of opinion about the guy, but then we can drill down on that and we can talk about why might this work out or why might it not, and love doing that with you. Hope we get a lot of chances this season. I'm certainly going to try and have you on as often as I can during the season for an offensive or defensive show, because those are always very good with you. They're always very good anyway. And I hope I get a chance to be on your show as well when you need me. Tell folks where you can find your work online.
Sure. We're going to be starting back up pretty soon here. I'm looking at the end of July to start kicking out content. Of course, all the Raven, you can find footage of just about any Raven on my channel if you want to really drill down, see what they do well. Also going to have a weekly show again this year, Ken. So, of course, I'll be inviting you on for some preseason stuff. It's Huddle It Up Films, on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at Huddle It Up Films. Pretty easy to find me. But I always enjoy being here, Ken. And yeah, I see these are the things that they're tough to talk about with other people when you start getting into real specifics. But I was thinking about that draft, and it got me excited to come on to speak with you because I'm like, man, I don't think that I think of Sam is just we're not looking at that. Like maybe Trenton Simpson is our backup Sam, and that's how we're going to use deception, wreaking havoc on third down. It's just a lot of different ways that this season could go, this defense can go. Just really makes me excited to talk to points where I'm like, I want to see what Ken has to say on this.
It'll be a lot of fun, because we're like opening our presents. It's really Christmas morning when you have a new defensive coordinator. And so McDonald's been here a year. We already know some of what his scheme looks like, or we think we do, but it could be that new players like what multiple uses for Hamilton, which I'm not really honestly in favor of. I think, try and get him into a role or two roles where he really understands them very well, and don't give him Camelot Correa disease in terms of moving around to multiple positions or Michael Orr disease. And I still think it's possible a player like Simpson, they might find some role that we haven't quite figured out what it is for him. That's not necessarily just backup will linebacker. I'm sure if somebody got hurt, that's exactly what he'll be. But if in times when they're not hurt, they are going to probably be tempted to try and get him on the field. He's going to be active on game day for special teams, and I'm sure they're going to be tempted to try and get him on the field in other ways. And it'd just be interesting to see how that happens, whether it has to be rotationally or in blowouts, or whether it's something where they can actually find a package of plays for him to do something interesting.
Yeah, maybe play some nickel, not for one-on-one defense, but okay, maybe we're going to blitz him from that corner, or maybe we just drop him in a short zone.
Yep.
We're Sam linebacker, and I expect Simpson to work on his inside linebacker chops during the preseason. But when he was quoted, in fact, I talked to Voss and Yuri about this yesterday. He was quoted, "What's your role?" And he said something like, "To cause havoc on third down." So how is that gonna manifest itself? It's just gonna be an exciting preseason, Ken.
All right, lots of fun, Jason. Really appreciate you joining us. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. They're always open. Love to hear from you. Still got a little bit of time in July. This is a great time to get a short done during this dead period here before camp starts. Jason, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate you.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.